Okay, I think we can get started. Good morning, everyone. Happy second day of WCPA. My name is Jacqueline Bonneville, and I use she, her pronouns. And I am, for this conference, the immediate past president of WCPA. So I'm so honored to be here today to introduce this session to you all. The title of it, just to make sure you're all in the right place, is Leading the Pack, Fearless Salary Negotiation and Self-Advocacy. And my good friend Stacy Heike, who I see on this call right now, and I have presented a few times at WCPA on this very topic of salary negotiation. And one thing I know is that we can never know enough, and we can never know it early enough. So I'm really excited to learn together with our presenters today from Madison College. I will also be monitoring the chat. So at the end, I'll try to make sure we have enough time and can help if there's any questions that people raise that we want to talk about, but I'm really excited for this topic here today. So I am going to now turn it over. Oh, I should also say I will at the end be putting in an evaluation. So I hope you'll take a few minutes to do the evaluation and give some feedback on this presentation. But now I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful presenters from Madison College. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you so much for WCPA for giving us this opportunity to present, and everyone here that's joining us this Friday, this beautiful Friday morning, wherever you are. Hopefully it's just as gorgeous as it is here in Madison. My name is Sarita Field, and actually before I introduce myself, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Masaya to introduce herself and her role at Madison College.
Great. Thank you, Sarita. So my name is Masaya Xiong. I am an internship advisor. I serve the transfer program at Madison College. And yep.
Great. Thank you so much, Masaya. And my name is Sarita Field. I'm an advisor in Career and Employment Services. I'm actually Masaya's successor to her previous role. I focus on students in non-traditional occupations, which means students that are in an occupation where their gender represents 25% or less of the national aggregate workforce. And so the development of this curriculum really was born out of wanting to have an in-house offering for our students, especially women that are entering fields where they may not see people that look like them or share their experiences as often as men. We'll get into it a little bit later, but I don't know about you, salary negotiation is never a comfortable conversation that I have. I was talking with Jackie and Jacqueline before the start of this meeting, and I was reflecting on my pretty much in my professional career, like my first and only real attempt at salary negotiation. And it went something like, oh my God, thank you so much for the offer. If you could check and see if you could get me more money, that'd be great. But if not, like, that's fine. I'll still accept. It was, you know, not a way to go about it. So today we hope to give you some principles and tools to enter those conversations confidently, but even outside of the salary negotiation conversation, how to advocate for yourself in different professional settings. And before I share my screen and we get started, I do also want to introduce my co-presenter, Leah. She might be in and out a little bit, so if I pop up to let her out or let her into the room, she can't decide sometimes. So the fun of working at home with all our little loved ones, right? So let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. So hopefully all of you can see it. Go ahead and give me a thumbs up. Perfect. Okay. So a little bit of an overview. I'll give you some expectations. We did our introductions. We'll talk about the gender pay gap and then go over the 4 components of the pack mentality. We sort of designed this again for our Madison College students, and we are the Wolf Pack. So trying to put it into an easy way to remember as we enter these conversations. So a few ground rules. Please have your camera on when speaking. I also love not speaking to an empty room. So if you want to keep it on the whole time, I love to see your responses and feedback. Remain muted unless speaking. Excuse yourself, obviously, as needed. Feel free to ask clarifying questions in the chat. Jacqueline's going to be helping us with that chat. So please feel free to drop your questions there. Be present, be engaged, be you, and have fun. We're all bringing our own experiences and history into this conversation, and certainly salary negotiation is a different journey and process for everyone. So we definitely want to hear from your experience, and it looks like we're a medium-sized group, so that usually offers for the opportunity to get some feedback and insight from the participants, which I think just raises the quality of the overall workshop. All right, so going into the gender pay gap. So I assume most of us are pretty familiar with this, if not in detail, at least in generalities. The gender pay gap is the name that we ascribe to the difference in pay between what men and women are paid, both nationally as well as worldwide. Low wages mean women and their families have, less resources to support their needs, food, shelter, transportation, as well as money to save for or invest for long-term goals such as purchasing a home or planning for higher education. And as it stands most recently, women make about 80% for every dollar that a man makes. And just for a little clarification, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's saying that a woman walks in for a lawyer position at a firm and a man walks in a lawyer position at a firm and it's going to be reflected 80 cents every dollar. It's also incorporating the statistics that show that women's work and the opportunities that are available to them are often in sectors with lower paying positions, such as the work that I focus on, non-traditional occupations, where women traditionally enter helping professions such as nursing, whereas becoming a doctor pays much more than that. So this gender gap also reflects the opportunities that each gender tends to feel that they are able to pursue with success. Does that make sense? Okay. So what does this look like over a lifetime? And I was, 80 cents for every dollar doesn't necessarily sound like, I don't know, to me it does sound like a lot of money, but when you add it up and really think about the impact over a lifetime, while a couple of dollars for, an hour or a few thousand per year may not seem that dramatic, the gap as it exists means that on average, women will earn about $600,000 less than their male counterparts in their professional lifetime. And women of color are impacted at an even greater level. So taking a look at that here, African-American women, that looks like $840,040. And for Latina women, $1,043,800. Feel free to use that little reaction button also at the bottom of your Zoom meeting. I want to hear what you guys think about those figures. I was pretty darn blown away by that. And taking a look at what this graph means. So basically, Hispanic or Latino women earn 53% or 54%, depending on which survey you look at, on the dollar. So Black or African-American women, 61 or 62. White women, this is where we get that 80 cent for every dollar sort of figure. Asian women get the closest to equity in regards to pay, and then a lot of other ethnic subgroups aren't currently even drilled down into to get clear figures on that and see how that disparity affects those communities. So I think that's also telling as well, what research, what figures actually exist, and what research and figures don't, and what communities aren't being included in this type of research. So why does it exist? Well, sexism, a patriarchal society, but drilling down a little bit further into that, there are many factors, both institutional as well as that exist personally within women that can affect why the gender pay gap exists. In addition to women getting paid less than men in the same position, as I had mentioned previously, women are more likely to enter occupations that are lower paying. So women's work such as social work, teaching, human services, and when I say women's work, I want to put big quotes around it. There's nothing that is intrinsically feminine about this kind of work. It's just how we conceive of what is traditionally a feminine or masculine position. And from a young age, girls and boys are socialized to view certain occupations as appropriate options. I've been to a few like gender-centered workshops, and a typical graphic that's very telling is like they'll have a little like medical toolkit, and the one that's branded for with the same exact items, a little toy medical toolkit, and the one that's branded for little boys says doctor, and the one that's branded for little girls says nurse, and it's pink, you know, and the other one is blue, and it's the same exact stuff that's inside the toy. So those sorts of things that started at a young age really do socialize the genders into thinking certain occupations are more appropriate than others. In addition, there is something that researchers have deemed the motherhood penalty. So research shows that many mothers suffer workplace-related consequences after having a child. When compared with men and childless women, new moms are often perceived as having lower competence, lower commitment. They face higher professional expectations and a lower chance of hiring and promotion. And actually, according to one study, the pay gap between mothers and women who aren't mothers could be bigger than the one between men and women. And another study shows that a woman who's married with a family is again seen as like less commitment to the organization, is less considered for promotion, but a man who's married and has a family is seen the opposite, more committed, more likely to be promoted than his female counterpart. So that exists as well. Additionally, employer bias, which is certainly part of the motherhood penalty, employer bias, whether conscious or not, can result in not rating women as highly, not paying them their due. In other words, employers may unknowingly undervalue the work that female employees do. And finally, which we hope to address here today, is lack of negotiation. So women are much less likely than their male counterparts to negotiate at the time of hire. So why don't women ask? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the chat and see what you guys think. Why haven't you negotiated in the past? I just mentioned that men are much less likely, or much more likely rather, than women to negotiate. To put a figure to that, 42% of men negotiate compared to 28% of women. Like, wow, that's a huge, huge disparity. And taking a look at this picture, we see this woman here with 3 doors in front of her. One says liked but not respected. The middle one says respected but not liked. And the one on the right says respected and liked with men only in parentheses. So that can represent a double bind. Katie shared in the chat that she was hired with a group of 6 to 8 others. Oh, let me scroll up real quick. And all the other women said that they didn't negotiate. Some said they were just happy to have an offer. I have been there so many times. I completely identify with that, Katie. And a lot of it comes down to, I know my feelings were, be grateful for the offer. What if I, push back and then they take it away? For me, there's always been a fearfulness. Now I realize you can negotiate without fear of them taking away the offer. They can just say, this is our, final offer, but they're not going to say, oh, you want more money? Never mind, we're rescinding our offer just because of that. I've never heard of anybody doing that. And if they do, that's someplace that you don't want to work. So take that take that as dodging a bullet there. And just to read another one from the chat, Nikki says, I think one reason would be that the pay gap is pounded into us. So we just assume we should make less. Wow. It hits me in my heart, but it hurts in the heart, you know? And I think that much of that is true. We've become accustomed to it. And Michelle says, feeling badly that the university has a financial crisis. How can I ask for more, even knowing that I deserve it and have picked up more responsibilities? Huge, huge. So also taking on the needs of the organization, maybe even before we consider our own value and our own needs. So consider, what is your biggest challenge when it comes to salary negotiation? I did forget to point something out, but I will do so now. The participant workbook was dropped into the chat at the beginning of the presentation. In the upper right-hand corner of the PowerPoint slide, this number with a circle around it, that represents the workbook page that it represents. So, and thank you, Jackie, for sharing that again. And what you can do is on page 7, there is an opportunity for you to fill this out and have it for your own information and reflection. You'll also notice that the participant workbook has a lot more information than we cover here today. That's on purpose. We're sort of hitting the high points here, but I wanted to include a lot more information for you to continue to study and reflect upon. And there are some role plays in there as well that we won't have time to do today. So heading into the pack mentality, I am going to turn it on over to Masaya.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sarita. So what are the 4 components to salary negotiation? Okay. PAC stands for prepare, advocate, consider, close, and keep practicing. Okay. So the first one is prepare. So I'm going to cover this piece, and you know that is like the key to everything is how well do you prepare? But even when you do prepare, let's not over prepare, right? We don't want to get into this whole analysis process and then you just get stuck and then you get more questions and then it just makes you back off. And so the idea of what we're trying to do today is just to give you some tips, some suggestions. And I know that we have some amazing attendees today. So if you guys have some experiences, I know Jacqueline, you said you did a lot of presentation on salary negotiation. Please, like if there are some tips that you have, there's some things that you want to jump in and say, by all means, we would definitely appreciate that. So here are the things I'm going to definitely cover. Promise yourself you negotiate. You have to at least do it, right, and try. Because the only way you're going to get better at it is if you actually take the first step and do it. Okay, and that's how you're going to get really confident as you, every time you go into an interview and you get a job, you're going to negotiate, like you're going to get more confident as you start to negotiate. Learn the market, not only in the industry that you're in, but understand location. Okay, like, you know, look at Madison and then you look at Eau Claire and Green Bay, you're comparing sometimes cost of living. What does that actually look like? So not only are you going to learn the market, but you also want to learn about the education, right? Years of experiences. What does that all play into it as you're looking into your research? Determine a target salary range. This is something that we're going to cover a little bit, and then decide a walkaway point. What is that absolute value that you're going to sit here and say, I am just not going to budge on this, so I have to walk away if I need to. And so we'll talk a little bit about that too towards the end of the slide, and then obviously keep on practicing. Okay. So next slide. So in Prepare, I just have a graph here on salary.com. On the chat here, I did put up a couple of different resources. You can go to Glassdoor, Indeed, PayScale. The one that I really like is Salary.com. I do use Glassdoor.com too. And all it really is just an understanding of your market based on your, whether it's in higher education or whether it's your title, you can look that all up. And here is obviously the examples on a welder. I also have one on my other screen here in terms of just to give you a perspective. So I just looked up academic advisor in Madison, Wisconsin. And according to here, the median, okay, the 50th percentile median is at $47,944. And so if you're applying for a position and you say the minimal is $33,000, well, we all know, and I don't know if you know this, but there is some ways to actually look up information based on classification, right? That's why we all have like associate, then student, like say associate student services coordinator, and then you have student services coordinator, and then you have senior, right? It seems like they have 3 tiers. And so based on that job description, you always want to look at what is the minimum pay. They're asking for minimum, they're not saying maximum. And obviously these different tiers will have different salary ranges that you can go up to, and you have a maximum. Now, of course, we always want to use that for information. And so if you sit here and say, well, if the median is $47,000 and the minimum is $33,000, and then you can actually insert all your experiences like education, user experience, your performance. You can put reports too, and then you can actually put whether or not there are other directives under you. Okay, and then based on that, it's going to give you a salary of what it feels you should be worth. Okay, so this is a kind of like a really cool simulation in salary.com. I highly encourage you to do it. I think yesterday I just put a couple different things, and it just said that my salary should be like 45,000 or something like that. Okay, just to throw it out there. So if I know that, then typically I would sit here and say, okay, if the minimum salary is 33,000 and here's 45,000 according to salary.com, do I want to go in between that? Do I feel comfortable? Because based on my experience, that's what it's saying. Based on my education credential, that's what it's also saying to me. So keep that in mind, right? So you really want to have data in terms of like to give you perspective. It's not really like the whole truth, right? And so you want to look at data from perspective of what does that mean for your situation? And what is it that you're willing to negotiate based off of that? Okay, the next one. So obviously part of preparation is, one of the things I've always mentioned is create a realistic budget, right? And so a lot of times, we don't always think about that. So not only do you want to like think about negotiating your salary, you want to think about what is the actual take-home pay. And so I did put a resource up there that I always go to. I literally go to this site all the time. If I want to know what my take-home pay is, I go to Paycheck, I think salary or something like that. I know the link is up in the chat. And I just look at in terms of like, I just put in like Wisconsin, I put if I'm paid annually, and then I just like give like what I think I would pay in pre-tax, and then it just like gives me an idea of what my take-home pay is, and use that against your budget. And when I say budget, I know that, say for example, you live in Eau Claire and you're like, wow, I love Madison, I want to move to Madison. But then you don't really know like what is the cost of living in Madison compared to Eau Claire, right? So I also put a link up there where you can look at from city to city in terms of cost of living, transportation, what is the cost of grocery, what is the average cost of like a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom housing. I mean, they give you all of that perspective, and then you take that in addition to all your expenses like student loans, credit card, car loan, whatever expenses that you have, and you put that into a spreadsheet, and you sit here and say, okay, on average, this is what it's looking like per month. If I'm looking at $35,000, if I want to negotiate up to $35,000, what is my take-home pay? And use that against it and say, are you comfortable? Are you not comfortable with that? Do you want a little bit more? How much do you want to save? And so a lot of times, when you're looking at creating a realistic budget and how that plays into your preparation and your research, it really plays a lot, because then you don't want to like shortchange yourself, but you also want to be realistic, because if you find that, wow, Madison is just way too expensive for me, even if I, negotiate up to here, or $33,000 is just not gonna make it for me because my expenses is this, right? So the idea is, you really want to use that data to really sort of help you think about, how does that play into as you're beginning this part of the research. And obviously you assess the value of benefits. So why is benefits so important? And I'm going to use higher education because we are all higher education professionals here, right? We know how important it is. It is quite hard to really negotiate. In my opinion, it is very hard to negotiate. And so the few times that I have seen folks who negotiate salary is, I always say 2% above the minimum is what I always say, right? So if it's 33,000, usually I would negotiate 2% with the hope that they come back with 1%. And you know how hard it is to get 2% raise in higher education. We all know that. So I'll take 1% over 2% any day, whatever to get me to where I need to go. Sometimes another is you negotiate your title change. If they come back and say, we're going to give the associate student services coordinator, level, I might say, well, can I just go ahead and based on my years of experience, depending on what my research is telling me and my value and what I can bring to the department, I will totally get, I want a title change. Is it possible that I can go to the student services level? And if you know, and this is, I don't know if this is okay, but I'm definitely going to share this. And I've done this with a couple of my friends and peers. I don't do this a lot with my students, but more so for those who are entering into higher education, right? They're always asking, well, the minimum is $33,000. And I see someone mention that, and that makes you feel like, oh, minimum is 33, who wants to work? Or what can I do? There's a way for you to check out all the classification titles. You just go through, say for example, Madison. You can go to a search, you look up the classification title, you look at it, and if you look at the job description, they'll put parentheses, T50, T25, and whatever that is going to give you the salary range. You look it up, you click on it, it'll give you a salary range of 1 to 10 or something like that, and it'll tell you the range of 4 is 33 to 44, $33 to like $39,000. And so that also gives you perspective, right? In terms of like, okay, if you don't want to go through salary.com, there's a ways for you to determine, those aspects. And that's just the part of working in higher education in the state, right? It's like all of our salary at the end of the day is somehow public knowledge, right? People can look up our salary and they know what we're making, right? And so that's all part of why we're working for the state. Whereas it's not the same for if you work for a private firm. And so I usually just help coach and sort of go through that piece of it and say, well, according to this like associate student services level, it's like 33 to like say 39. And so it seemed like the max is at 39. And so you can do like the 2% of 33, or you can go the median of both of that and see what they say. And so there's so many different tips and so many different things, but this, I just wanted to just share that with you in terms of, given that we're all in higher education, and if you're looking to go into it, that's one of the ways. Another preparation is talk to your network, talk to your professionals, right? I mean, we're all in this space. If you're not sure, there are like 30 of us in here. And so if it's not with me, go to Jacqueline, go to Sarita, right? Go to Angie. I mean, there's so many of us in here. Ask the question. I want to know more about this department. I want to know, like, how does it, what are some of the goods and pros and cons and all that stuff, right? But then, you don't definitely want to say, well, how much money do they make? That's not what you want to do. But you want to talk about an average. What does that look like in their department? Are they mostly grant funded, right? Are they on hard dollars? I mean, all of that really do play, right? Grant dollars, hard dollars, they all make a difference, and so forth. So I just want to put that out there. As far as benefits, I have found in higher education, it's quite hard to negotiate benefits, but you should always try. And so these are some of the questions that you want to ask, right? What benefits mean the most to you? How do potential benefits impact your bottom line? In addition to what the job offers in regard to insurance, vacation, what does professional development look like at this organization? Just keep in mind that salary is just the base salary. But we know that the total package does include base salary and anything that the company or the organization or an institution is investing in you. So even if you make $33,000 at the end, you might be worth $80,000, depending on how much the employer already contributes. And so obviously we're all part of the state of Wisconsin, so they'll say, well, we're contributing 50% of that. There is all that piece that goes into it. So you need to just not only look at salary, but the total package and whether or not that package is sustainable to you. Okay, the next slide. Here's some potential benefits for you to consider, right? And this is probably leads more towards like whether you want to go into the private sector, public sector, that's fine. And this is some things for you to think about. Family medical leave, vacation, movie expenses, car and phone reimbursement, any type of insurance, any professional tuition reimbursement, flex time, title change, responsibility, stock options, all of those are ways that you can negotiate. I would say, for me personally, it's a lot easier to negotiate these if I'm working for a private firm. Like if I want to go to like Google, I will totally do all of this, right? If I want to go to Epic, yep, I'm going to do all of this. But higher education is a little bit different, right? These are like pretty much the standard, you know, package, right? This is what we offer. We're all part of like the state of Wisconsin insurance, right? Our life insurance also built up for that. But then of course there are some nuances that are a little bit different in terms of like, you know, not everyone offers 403 packages or 257, you know, packages. Not everyone has stock option. You know, retirement investment plans, you know, a lot of those can be like more like a desire and a want that maybe they're, you know, they're giving to you, but then most of that is out of your own pocket, right? Out of your own, you know, part of the pre-tax advantage, you know, to having that, but then the employer will not necessarily actually, you know, contribute to that other than what they have already said they're going to. But here are some things that I think you can negotiate on. Flex time. You know, who would have thought that today that, you know, people used to say, oh, wow, you cannot work from home. And now look at us. Now we have the capacity to work from home. So moving forward, definitely negotiate. If you want like 1 day a week to work at home, go ahead and do it. You know, if you can negotiate that, that's great. You know, title change, another one I mentioned, go for it. I say that's definitely worth it. You know, if you know that you bring value, you know that what you can do, ask for that title change. Don't settle for what they're going to ask for that. On top of that, car phone reimbursement. This is interesting. I think that a lot of times we all have like, my assumption is that higher education, especially when I used to work at Madison, they had fleet services. So I don't always have to take my car. I'll just go to fleet services, get a car, drive to where I need to go, and come back. So that, I know that's part of that process. And if it isn't, they're gonna give me mileage reimbursement for that. And the phone. If you have a different site location and you know, they're saying, oh, well, you know, we want you to use your cell phone. And you're like, no, I need you to give me a phone. You can negotiate for that too. So if you have like different site locations, that's also a good way to definitely think about how that might play into your negotiation as well. And for professional development and tuition reimbursement, a lot of times, you know, it is based on departments. Every department is really different. And so ask that. Feel free to ask that as part of your interview questions. Like, you know, you offer professional development tuition reimbursement fund and see what they say. Oftentimes you don't have to negotiate for that. They'll just tell you that could be part of the interview process. So maybe not necessarily the first one, but maybe you get to the second one, right? Or the third one. And so I never know. Higher education have like a long hiring process. So, but these are all the ways that, you know, you can definitely prepare yourself for and think about it. Okay, next slide. Determine your walkaway point and stick to it. Like this is so important. It doesn't matter if you're going to higher education or you're going to a private, like you have to feel and know that if they're not going to negotiate, if they just don't even want to exercise that, then you're like, well, if you don't want to exercise that, then what does that say about your organization? Remember what Sarita was saying? Like, you know, if they come across like they give you any hint. So it's not only about salary, but it's a great way to really think about, you know, how do they value their employees, right? So you want the opportunity to at least negotiate. You don't want them to say, no, we're not doing this, you know, unless they tell you that right away, that here's the max. You can only go up to here and that's it. If they give you anything in which they're like, I've already said, this is what it is, take it or leave it, then fine, you know. But for yourself, you also have values, right? And you also know what you can and can't do. I don't want you to settle for less. We all don't want you to settle for less. We also want you to make sure that you do the best you can when you're preparing yourself for these stuff. You do your research as best as you can, and then you decide if they're not going to give you, they're not meeting you certain things, then you can, you know, just go ahead and walk away. Okay, one door might close, another door is going to open. So think of it like that. Okay, next.
The next component to the pack mentality is advocate. And this is the component that I would really encourage you to consider other facets of your professional life aside from the salary negotiation conversation as to where it applies. And truly it can apply, well, not just professionally, but personally as well. How do you speak to your own value? How do you argue for the things that you want and need in a clear, concise, and effective manner? So this is all about you being your biggest supporter or advocate. something that I consider quite a bit being a transplant here to Wisconsin. I'm originally from California. I lived in Maine for 8 years and I moved here from Colorado. So I've been around quite a bit. But Wisconsin has the most charming Midwestern humility. And I hadn't quite experienced that before in such a wonderful way. And I have noticed with some students that I've worked with in mock interviewing that there can be a hesitation to sell oneself, you know, and in questioning them, like, why are you having trouble speaking to your talents and where you're outstanding? And it's like, well, I don't want to brag. And so I encourage them, it's not about bragging, it's about being honest. You want to be honest with a potential future employer about what you're bringing to the table, and being humble and minimizing your accomplishments or your talents or what impact you can have on an organization is not being completely honest with what you have to offer. So I like to think of it in that regard when you're thinking about being your own advocate. And as lovely as it would be if potential employers always offered us our ideal salary from the get-go, it likely will take some negotiation to find the salary that both you and your employer are happy with. And also, wouldn't it be lovely if potential employers recognized in an interview your humility, you know, and like, oh, well, she's really selling herself short. Chances are they're going to take you at your word with what you're saying you can bring to the table. So here are some do's and don'ts, and do's and don'ts can also vary from person to person, but this is what, between research and my own personal experience, I have found. Number one, this is a little controversial, so I like to include it to create a little bit of discussion, but do bring notes into your interview and negotiation conversations. I find that many people think that bringing notes into an interview is a no-no, that it indicates lack of preparation, but a potential employer isn't necessarily going to expect that you remember, you know, hard facts and figures coming into a meeting. And an interview, no matter how many times you've done it, at least for me, always comes with a little bit of nerves with it. And so everything that I, you know, really wanted to hit home and make sure that I address within the interview, a meeting could go out the window the second I walk in the door. So having a few key notes so that I can make sure to stress the impact that I plan on making in the organization or the accomplishments that I've had in my previous organization can be extremely helpful. Do be open and flexible, but maintain that bottom line. Remember that negotiation, it's not a battle, it's a conversation. Do anticipate the employer's reactions and responses. So as best as you can, you know, in that negotiation conversation, try to come up with supporting material, just as in any sort of debate or not to say a word with a bad connotation, but any argumentative conversation where each side has their own goals in mind. You want to make sure that you do have supporting evidence for what you're asking for, and also know that employers are anticipating having this conversation with you. So a few people in the chat pointed out that, you know, you see that that starting salary in the job posting and it seems very final, but know that employers fully anticipate on having a negotiation conversation. So, and you've promised yourself you're going to do it. So make sure that you also anticipate what the employer's reactions might be. And as Masaya talked about, that can come with, you know, making sure that you have market data to support your ask. And also remember that the employer has picked you. They want to make it work with you. The hiring process includes the value of the people's time that have sat on the hiring committee, the supervisor that you'll eventually work for. They've invested time and money into hiring you. The negotiation conversation in itself isn't necessarily going to change that desire for them. So also emphasize what the company gains by hiring you, and we'll get into this in just a moment here. Also communicate in impact statements. Again, we'll actually be talking about that next. Don't get personal, and this can be a little bit difficult to do sometimes, but the employer doesn't want to know necessarily if you want more money so that you can save up for a down payment on a house or other personal reason if you have kids going to college. And truly that's not the point anyway, because what you plan to do with your salary or your money is not an indicator of your value. You deserve to be compensated fairly for your work based on your education, experience, the awesome things that you have brought to previous positions, as well as market data. And also don't disclose your salary history or expectations. And we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. So emphasizing what the company gains by hiring you. And this is, again, a major sticking point for many people, but I want to drive it home. Highlighting your strengths isn't bragging. It's not being egotistical. It's being honest about what you have to offer. Just based on, throw it in the chat, has anybody ever felt a little bit wary or not confident in sort of driving home what you're bringing to a potential position when you're in either the interview conversation or salary negotiations? And I'll keep an eye on the chat as we move along. So what are impact statements? So impact statements are a way for you to communicate your strengths and value as a future employee. Value statements should be used throughout the interview and negotiation process, as well as just your professional life. And what this does is it decreases the amount of work an employer has to do to determine that you are the right fit for the position and that you deserve to be paid within your desired salary range. When I'm doing mock interview practice with students, this is something that I talk about a lot. Oftentimes, let's say an employer asks, what would your previous supervisor say are your top 2 strengths? And they might say time management and communication. And they'll just leave it there. And I'm like, okay, what I want to do is make sure that, like, obviously the employer or the interviewer is going to deduce a certain amount of information from the answers that I'm giving them, but I want to have as much control over what those perceptions and what conclusions they're coming to are. So instead of saying time management, oh, time management, here is an example of that, and this is how it relates to why I'm going to be the best person for this particular job. It takes that deduction process and the work that the potential employer is having to do to come to the conclusion you want them to, and just removing it. You're just telling them the conclusion that you want them to come to, which is that you're the right fit for the job. So, and here on the screen, you'll see this is the impact structure statement. And so you'll see it says, I successfully, you have your accomplishment by utilizing these skills, which resulted in, and that's the impact to the organization. And this will be important to this position because it can seem a little blocky if you're doing it like this. And in your workbook, you do have opportunity to do some practice impact statements, which I definitely encourage you to do. And I've done it myself. But once you get used to speaking in this manner and answering the interview questions, it'll become a lot easier and more natural for you going forward. A couple people have commented in the chat in regards to if you find it challenging to speak to your strengths. One participant said, definitely, especially earlier in my career, some of that Midwest humility you talked about, some socialization as a woman, and some of my own insecurities that can really make it challenging to advocate for myself. I'm very comfortable advocating for others. Wow, huge thumbs up on that. I feel the same exact way. Another participant said, when I started in higher ed, I was wary and didn't know how to advocate for myself. I used data from salary.com. In 2016, I was asked to step into a role that I'd basically been doing for the institution for free on top of my current role. I made sure to check salary.com and mention that I had done this role before I was given this opportunity. Awesome, great way of advocating for yourself there. So here's just an example of that. So I don't even remember what kind of, oh, this, I wrote this with the potential position of a, I don't remember what position I wrote it for. We'll have to try to figure it out. I successfully launched a new online application, like a college application, by utilizing website development and communication skills, which resulted in a tripling of overall applicants, increasing higher options, and a more varied talent pool. This will be important to this position because effective recruiting is critical to this role. So corporate recruiter is what I wrote this for. So I hope this makes sense. Again, it might seem a little bit chunky, but basically you're starting out with what you accomplished, what skills went into that accomplishment. So the online application took website development and obviously communication by formulating in a way that was easily understandable and able to be completed by applicants, what the outcome was, and what that ties to in the position that you are applying for. Many people actually may do the first 3 parts, but forget the last one. I always want to bring it back to either the position or the organization somehow. Why does it make you the right fit for this job? Or why does it make you the right fit for this organization? All right, so moving on to salary history and expectations. And I don't know about all of you, but if you're like me, I didn't know that I had a choice in whether or not to disclose this information. So, and you'd be happy to know that you actually do. While it might be tempting to discuss salary during the interview process, it is important to try to refrain from discussing your previous or current salary at all, and to not discuss expectations until you have been extended an offer. Some states actually have laws that prevent employers from soliciting this information, but actually in 2018, Wisconsin passed a law affirming employers' right to ask for salary information. But that doesn't mean that you have to give it. And why? Why would you want to refrain from that? Well, if, many times you're not necessarily doing a lateral move, so your current salary may not be probably isn't an appropriate guidepost for what your salary in your next position should be. That should be based on market data, your experience and accomplishments, and not necessarily your current role, depending upon maybe education, like maybe you've received a degree within the span of having, been given your current salary and your next one. That could mean that you should have a huge hike in your salary. So using that, giving that information to an employer can result in them basically giving you an offer that you might think is appropriate based on your previous salary, but isn't appropriate based on where you are in your professional tenure at this point. Certainly declining to answer the question could, feel very, very awkward, but there is a way to do so, and with practice, hopefully become easier and more comfortable to you. And Angie, great point. I will briefly touch on what to do when you are given that question on an application form. So 3-step process: politely decline to answer the question, acknowledge the employer's concern, and pivot away with an open-ended question. So here are some examples. So in regards to salary history, this position is not exactly the same as my last job. I'd like to discuss what my responsibilities would be here and then determine a fair salary for this job. I'd appreciate it if you could make me an offer based on whatever you have budgeted for this position, and we can go from there. My salary history and expectations are in line with my professional achievements and experience and with the requirements of this position. When I started to, research these kinds of conversations and formulate these examples, in addition to really challenging me personally to sort of, I guess, be commanding in that kind of way, it also triggered for me thinking like, this is also setting a precedent for what that kind of working relationship with that organization will be like. Like, you know, the term girl boss, when I read these statements, I'm like, that's the kind of person that I want to be, where I'm like, I'd appreciate it if you could make me an offer first. You know what I mean? And those are the kinds of statements that I find men in my life have not struggled so much to say, but I struggle to say, you know? So being more affirming and advocating for yourself. In regards to salary expectations, I'd like to see if I am a good fit first before we discuss salary. I'd like to learn more about the role before I set my salary expectations. As we move forward in the interview process, I expect that my salary would line up with the market rates for similar positions in this area. And again, this last one is a good catch-all for either. I'd appreciate it if you made me an offer based on what is budgeted for the role, and we can go from there. So that one works for both. Yes, Margie says, I'm going to use these as affirmations in my bathroom mirror every morning. Yes, I think that's a great idea. So here we go, back to that question of what if it's in an online form and it requires that information sometimes, right? Like if you don't put it, it'll say, oh, you can't proceed to the next part of the application before you fill it out. Well, you do have a few options. You can fill in the salary boxes with the top of your desired salary range, and that's even for salary history, okay? If there is a comment box, you can type all figures reported in this form reflect my current salary target of blank. If there is no comment box, you can start a new section as though you have one more job to add to the work history. And instead of putting in the company name or job title, just type it in the blurb above, like in the company name. What do you guys think of that? When I saw that in an article, because I had that same question myself, I was like, oh my gosh, mind blown. I didn't even know that that was an option. I thought that if I didn't fill it out, you know, I wasn't going to be able to apply for the job at all. So that leads us into the C portion of the PAC mentality, and I will turn that back on over to Masaya.
Okay, I know we have just a little bit more, but okay, there's a lot that's happening here, so I'm going to keep it brief. But when you consider and close, right? And so when you got the offer, you're going through all this preparation, you're building your impact statements, you're thinking about how you're going to advocate. Now what, right? You don't want to commit too early. You know, feel free to say to the hiring manager, hey, how long can I get back to you in a couple of days? Or they say, yeah, you have 72 hours or 3 days to get back to me. That's fine. Take all the time that they are willing to give you and think through how you want this to look like. Negotiate can take a few back and forth at times. Just know that's what's going to happen. Negotiate benefits and extras. $5,000 doesn't mean much to a company, but it means a lot to you, right, in your situation. And obviously, take your time, okay? Next slide. So when you have made your decision, you know, you want to either thank the employer for considering or politely declining. If you decide that this is not what I want, or it's not what I'm desiring, then it's okay. You can always go back to the employer and thank them and then decline the offer. Now, if you do accept the offer, obviously you want it in writing, you want to thank, and then you also want to really talk about what is it that you're going to bring to the department, right, or to the organization. So as we go through this whole PAC mentality, this is a lot to take in, right? And you're wondering, if I do these steps, this is going to get me. But the reality is that's not the case. It's never linear, right? It's always like back and forth. It's like this huge thing that you just, you know, go back and forth and you negotiate, right? So you're always thinking about what you're going to do. And so as you can see in this slide here, it kind of feels like that, where it feels like wow, it's giving me a headache. What's going on here? You know, first you prepared and you thought you were done with that. And you're like, oh no, you get more information. That's not the case. And you go to advocate, wow, you know, I have one impact statement. Maybe I should have like 5 just in case, right? If they come back and just say, you know, they're not budging. You're like, here's what I can do. So you want to get those impact statements ready, you know, and then you go back to consider and closing. You're like, think about a lot of things. So just know that this experience and this process is all part of it. And it's also, because I know that at the end of it, you're going to feel better. You're going to feel good. Whether or not you accept the offer or you don't, the idea of you going into this experience is going to help you prepare for the next one. Okay. And so that's why these stages are never ever linear, and you just take it as it comes and you just keep going. So that leaves us to keep practicing. I'm going to turn it over to Sarita.
Yes, so practice, practice, practice. And something that just came to mind for me is I was reading, you know, an article on how, when you're sort of thinking of your accomplishments and how to, you know, provide evidence even to yourself of your value and what you're bringing to an organization, this practicing can start now. If you get accolades from your colleagues or your supervisor in an email, in a Post-it note on your desk, start a file for yourself, whether that be in your, you know, Outlook or in printed form, whatever works best for you, so that you can start to be thinking in terms of the impact that you're bringing to an organization. And that way, the work that you have to do to be able to advocate for yourself becomes less and less, and it becomes more of a natural part about how you navigate your current role, as well as going into potential future offers. So getting comfortable with negotiation is going to take time. On a scale from 1 to 10, I'm probably about a 6 at this point, you know, and feel free to put in the comment on a scale from 1 to 10 where you feel you are. Maybe do on a scale from 1 to 10 before this workshop / where you are now. I'd be curious to see. I would say prior to me developing this curriculum, I would say 1. And now I've moved the needle to a 6. So I feel pretty good about that, but certainly it's going to continue to be a process for all of us throughout our professional journeys. Make sure that you be patient with yourself. Again, keep practicing. And this is more for Madison College students, but if you do have resources available to you at your current organization, or certainly maybe your previous university or colleges, there is help out there for assistance. So here are the final just review, and I'll give it back to Masaya.
Yes, so again, the PAC mentality, right? Prepare, 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 and advocate, advocate, advocate. Consider and close based on what you have researched and based on how you have developed your advocacy, you know, impact statements. And obviously you keep practicing. I know that sometimes we don't always often think about this, but this is a time we are living in an uncomfortable space. So let's just be uncomfortable and go with it, right? I don't know if I just want to mention this book that I used to read to my daughter, where it talks about we're going on a bear hunt. And they don't want to go over it, right? You can't go under, you can't go over, you can't go around it, just go through it. And so as you go through, you know, this whole set of negotiation for yourself, you want to go through the obstacles and go through the challenges and make it difficult. Because if you don't make it difficult, you know, you're not going to be able to elevate yourself. And so part of this presentation is to remind yourself that, hey, you know, you got this, okay? And you have like a wealth of professionals, and you have a wealth of support that's going to be there along with you. And seek those support out and just keep doing it. So as to sort of end the presentation, there's a couple of different reflections that we have for you. Is, you know, what surprised you today? You know, and then what is something that, in addition to what surprised you, what are some things that you've known, but you haven't even practiced, right? It's one thing to know, but when you don't practice, you're like, oh, that's a reminder. Yes, yes. You know, what was that light bulb moment for you? You know, whether it is from what we're presenting, or from what your peers are saying in the chat feature, and what positive change do you see yourself practicing and applying most easily? And considering your biggest challenge you identified, how do you feel about it now? Okay, so
I'm grateful. It looks like we still have about a half hour and 15 minutes for discussion. So maybe for the next 2 or 3 minutes, we can open it up if you want to unmute yourself and provide feedback on one of these questions, and then we can head into a little Q&A. Does that sound good, Masaya? Great.
Well, hello. I'm going to take myself off my camera. I'm Danielle Carley. I'll put my camera on so you can see me. Hello, hi. I really enjoyed your presentation today. There's quite a bit of things that I learned actually, because I've never actually attended anything like this before. So I didn't know about this whole pack, which is really interesting. I'm going to look into that further. I work with a lot of interns at the school I work with at my college, so helping them prepare themselves to enter the workforce. This is really, really good information for me to share with them that I didn't personally know myself. I think what didn't really surprise me that much is the fact that the Native American population isn't really in any demographics, not meaningfully. And I understand that our population is very, very tiny, but still, it'd be nice to have some data on that. And I'm just wondering, would there be any way to get any data on that, or is that just not really existing at the moment?
In the research that I've done from, census type statistics, it's been difficult to hone in on that particular population. I don't know if perhaps in the future there will be more of a move to capture that kind of information. So yeah, it's definitely, as I said before, illuminating what kind of information is out there and just as much what kind of information isn't. So yeah, any more reflections, or we can also open the floor for Q&A as well.
Hi, this is Angie. Oh, sorry, someone else was about to talk. I'll just quickly say that I shared some stuff in the chat throughout, but that I was really reluctant to negotiate early in my career. I don't know that I ever did. I can't recall. But it took me now into getting positions where I was the one offering the positions and seeing the other side of it to realize that you should always ask. Because I would have times where I was hiring multiple people for the same role with similar positions, and the way it would work out is that someone would ask, or similar experience, I mean, someone would ask and someone would not, and they would end up with different salaries simply because of that. And so now I have the validation of having been on the other side. So anyone who's not been on the other side, my advice, like you very much covered and did a great job of doing with a lot of wonderful techniques, is always ask, because the worst that can happen is no.
Thank you.
Hi, I was just gonna say I really liked the tips for deflecting the salary related questions. I'd not really thought about how to deflect that kind of thing before. I always thought if they ask you a question, you should just answer it. So I really like that. Thank you.
Jacqueline mentioned in the chat AAUW. That was the first salary negotiation training that I ever took. It's such a great resource, and it is geared specifically for women. So if you certainly would like to follow up this presentation with another training, that is a wonderful resource. Yeah. Anyone else?
I also just want to echo what Sarita said about the AUW. I believe there is a group at UW-Madison that did this training to some of the students. I forget if it's, I don't know if it's through Career Services, like Sex Works or not, but they actually have this. So look out to see if they're going to be doing any training at UW-Madison to sort of help students negotiate salary too. So yeah, that is a really great workshop. It's about like a 2-hour workshop, I think. So yeah.
I can just jump in on a few things and see if we have more discussion, but thank you so much to you both. That was wonderful. And you're right. When we helped present, it was called Start Smart, and it's a workshop. I think that's what you're talking about, Masaya, for students. Stacy and I, who's on this call, we were facilitators for that. It used to be 3 hours, and then it went to 2 because people were having a hard time committing to 3. You've just presented much of what we were covered in an hour, which was so helpful. The difference was having time to practice, so finding a partner, a friend to sit down with and actually do this with is so important. I want to also agree with Angie. Being on the other side of this has both been enlightening to me, but also made me realize how I can advocate for women in negotiation as the person offering the job too. Your job, it's not just about when it's you on this side. We all said, like, it's hard to do it for ourselves, but we want to help others. You can do that on both sides, in terms of sometimes I've been able to advocate for someone to the next person about a salary, even though the candidate didn't do all of that themselves, to help make that happen. So please see that as your responsibility too, to equal the playing field here. I think that's so important. I wanted to highlight for people at 1 o'clock today, we're doing a session on financial peace. So if this is a piece of that and setting a budget is a piece of that, but if finances are something that you want to learn more about, we're excited about our presentation at 1 o'clock today too. So I just wanted to put a little plug in for that also. So good, did we get something more in the chat? Let's see. Oh, just a thank you, wonderful.
Yes, thank you to everyone that attended. Danielle, you had mentioned not knowing about PAC. That is sort of a way that we conceived internally to Madison College to make it easier for students to remember the steps, but we are happy to share the tools and the way that we've organized this information. So you can also feel free to reach out to us offline. You can get in touch with us here if you would like more information.
Yes.
Forgot to say one more thing I wanted to say too, which was just that when we've talked about how difficult this is to do for ourselves, but how we can support others, be that cheerleader for each other. And you are all saying it, whether it's a student or a friend. I had a friend who said, you may not accept that job until you call me. And that caused me to I had made that promise to her that I am not going to say yes, because I had all the reasons that I should just accept it until I called her. So that allowed me to pause, take the time, like you said, to do your research, to make sure that you ask the questions and that you feel okay about it. We don't have to do things on the spot like that. And I'm having that friend who was going to help pump me up and encourage me sure was a helpful thing when we're on the other side doing this for ourselves.
Thank you. And I really, just as one last thing, I really do encourage you to read through the participant guide in more detail. I included some testimonies of women who have gone through the negotiation process, which I always find helpful to see it lived out in real life. And there are more of those opportunities for role playing if either you can connect with someone offline who was in this training today as well, or with another friend that you can share this information with and practice. Certainly the best way to get good at anything is to practice and get comfortable with it. So there's a lot more information in that participant guide for you.
Yes, I definitely want to echo Sarita one more time. Sarita is so amazing. She actually developed the participant workbook and the presenter guide. So if some of you felt like this presentation is really cool, you want to offer it to your students, Sarita really put a lot of effort, and I always love to give shout out to my colleague. And so we actually have there's a presenter guide that I was following as I was doing this too. So if any of you are interested, and of course not that I'm always soliciting Sarita, but if you ever want to do train a type of thing that's cool too. I know that we'll be more than happy to really support all our higher education professionals to bring this presentation over to the students. So yeah.
Well, great. And I'm guessing you put your contact information, probably in the PowerPoint or the packet or whatever, if people have further questions, so they can follow up with you. That would be really helpful. But any last minute questions or discussion? And we have 4 more minutes.
I'm going to put my email into the chat as well. So Whitney shares with us, I don't necessarily feel that my years of experience represent my actual level of experience, contribution to my organization, and ability. I think I get really stuck on the number and feel like the employer will just focus on the number. Do you have advice on how to move past that? Well, if you look at those impact statements, it does not include a component for you to say how long you've been doing what you're doing. It's all evidence-based. There are many people that, have been in a position 10 years and haven't grown the position and have certainly fulfilled the requirements, but haven't taken it to the next level. And there are people that enter a position and completely transform it and evolve it within a year. So we all know that that time frame can be deceiving and not necessarily provide a lot of information for the employer. So I would really advise you in the participant workbook, there's multiple places for you to fill out for yourself impact statements. So figuring out, what are distinct accomplishments and ways that you've evolved your current position or previous ones, changes that you've made, and significant contributions to an organization. And again, starting that file now as well with accolades that you've received from your colleagues, supervisors, and maybe even students that you've served that can point to the impact that you've had. Masaya, would you add anything to that?
No, Sarita, I think you really hit it on there. It's definitely hard, but I think it's just with practice and everything. And, sometimes employees come back and they always want to focus on number, and for you, it's like you have to help them sort of move past that, right? And a lot of it is your story. You got to share that piece of your experience with them. And so you got to sell that story, you got to sell yourself, and hopefully that they'll move them a little bit more to where you want it to be.
I put the eval one more time in the chat so people can see that again. We are about at 10:15. So Masaya and Sarita, thank you so much. It was so great to hear from you. Thank you for your involvement in WCPA and making this happen. I hope people will continue to stay engaged today and look at our schedule for tomorrow. If you didn't hear me talk about that, it's designed mostly for undergrad students, but if you'd like to learn more about switching possibly in working in different areas in higher ed or working at different institution types or maybe going back to graduate school, you'll find some really helpful things for you also in that schedule, and you're welcome to join us and be a part of that. So thank you so much. Wishing you the best. Beautiful Fridays to all of you. Thank you.